Alright, so all the bones and the skin from my 4 chickens I put back into my pot after I had taken out all the broth and canned it. And I boiled it with some more water. This is the second batch I'm getting off of the same carcass. With this I'm going to make chicken soup with homemade noodles tomorrow, and I'll make a video of that. But you can reuse your bones more than once. The first time you use your bones, you get the strongest, most concentrated, rich broth. The second time you use them, you get a very nice broth. It's not quite as strong as the first, but it's still really good. I will probably toss the bones and the skin out after this because I don't really need to make another batch. But you can definitely get multiple uses off of one chicken. So this is my broth that I boiled the second time using my leftover bones and skin from the 4 chickens that I've cooked up and canned. This is what I have left of the second rendering of the bones and fat. And there is a fat layer on here. You can kind of see it right here. And we usually take most of the fat off. We have issues with fat in our family. It doesn't digest well with some of my kids. So I'm going to go ahead and take that off. But the reason I put it in a pitcher is because it's a lot easier to fit into the refrigerator than it is a big round pot. And I don't like to put it in jars if I don't have to. This is just really easy to stick it in there and keep there overnight. All the fat floats to the top and you can skim it off. So here we go. You can see it's really easy. All of this hard fat just comes right off. That looks about good. So now I'll move on to the next part. Alright, so the fat is off of it and I'm going to scoop it into my pot and start adding some water to it to thin it out. But I wanted to show you it's still very gelled. This is, we all want this with our bone broth. And like I said, this is the second time I've used these bones and skin. So feel free to use your bones and skin multiple times. I have done it 3 or 4 times. And I still end up, maybe not this gelled, but still have gel in it, still have flavor in it, still have nutrients in it. So don't throw those bones away until they're absolutely used up. Alright, so I'm making noodles, homemade noodles for the chicken soup that I'm making. It's really simple. I have 6 cups of flour. I have a dozen egg yolks. I have 1/4 cup of olive oil. I will use 2 teaspoons of salt, and I will add water until it's the consistency that I like, and I'll explain that later. I do have a dozen egg whites, and we don't waste anything here, so this can either be frozen, or tonight I will be making an angel food cake. Angel food cake takes 12 egg whites, so it's really easy to either freeze your egg whites a few at a time when you need egg yolks only, and when you have a dozen you can thaw them out and make an angel food cake. Or like tonight I'm using a dozen because I have a large family, and I'll make a cake for dessert. Alright, so what I do first is I add my flour, all of it, and then I add the egg yolks. Add my 2 teaspoons of salt. And my 1/4 cup of oil. You can use any kind of oil. I'm just using olive oil tonight. And then I will add some of my water. my dogs are fighting. I'm gonna go ahead and get it going. So you can see it's sort of mixed in a little bit, but it's still kind of powdery dry. I know I need to add more water, so I'm going to do it now before it turns into kind of a lump that needs more water. And it's a lot harder to incorporate the water into a lump than it is into a powdery mix like this. So I'll add a little bit more water. See, it needs just a little bit. If I add too much, it's going to be too sticky. So I'm going to go real slow here with adding the water. It needs to be sticky enough. This is real flaky still. It needs to be sticky enough that when I roll it out, it stays together and it kind of springs back a little bit. I'm almost feeling that when I squish it down, but it's still just a little bit too dry. If it's too dry, then it doesn't stick together and it doesn't make very good noodles. It's harder to roll out. So a tiny bit more water. And you can see it's sticking really well. It's almost sticking to my fingers, almost. And this is the way I like it. Now what I'm going to do is let it knead for several minutes now, and when it's ready I'll stop. But you can see there's still little bits of egg yolk, flour, so it needs to be mixed up a little bit more. Okay, so I let it knead a little bit longer, and you can see it's stretching, which is perfect. This is what we want, but it's holding together. There's no dry pockets in here. There's no areas where you see egg yolk. So this is exactly what you want, and it's not really sticking to my fingers. You know, I'm pulling it up, and I'm just getting little bits, and it comes off very easily too. So this is the consistency that you want. I used to follow recipes, but it was like every time I followed recipes, even if it was the same one over and over, I was always having to add less or more water. And I've just found it's easier to get all those ingredients in there and then to add your water and just keep adding until it reaches the consistency that you want. Otherwise, if you don't add enough and you try and take it out and start making noodles with it, it's a mess. And if you add too much, then you're having to add more flour to it to make it less sticky and gooey. So it's just easier for me overall to add the water a little bit at a time, and when it reaches the right consistency, I stop. So here's my finished dough, and if you see, it's very yellow. It's all of those beautiful egg yolks from our chickens in the back. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try and roll it a little bit so I can portion it out. And as you can see, it's not that sticky, which is exactly what I want. So I'll cut this in fourths so it's easier to deal with. I like using my little pizza cutter here. It works great. doesn't have to be perfect. You're just going to be rolling each section out and then cutting them into noodles. It's really simple. So I'll put a little bit more flour in here. When you're making soup and you put homemade noodles in there, any of this extra flour that ends up on the noodle helps thicken the soup a little bit. So you don't really have to worry. Okay. And I like my noodles a little bit thicker. Don't worry if it's not perfectly straight, if it's a rectangle, a circle. Noodles are noodles. You can see it just floats because it's the perfect consistency. I'm going to get it a little bit thinner. It likes to spring back into itself, so keeping it separate from itself is a little bit harder. And I have rheumatoid arthritis, so I can't use my thumb here very much, so I've learned to adapt, so it might look a little funny how I do this. But it works. Okay, I think that's a good thin, it's thick by most standards, but that's what we like here. Nice thick noodles in our chicken soup. Okay, and then you just use you can't use a knife. I like using this because it just rolls really fast and easy. Look how fast that is. And I do homemade food all the time. We do not buy store-bought noodles. I keep a little bit in stock simply because there are days when things go wrong and I just need something super fast. But for the most part, every time we need noodles, we make our own. I don't make them ahead of time either. I like them fresh. It's really, really, truly a simple thing to do. And I don't go into fancy stuff. I have comfort food. That's what I like to cook. That's what my family likes to eat. And that's what I do. If you want fancy, I'm not the channel for you. Now, if you wanted to, you could take any of these and you can pinch them up to make like little bow ties if you wanted. There's different things you can do with them, but I just don't have the time for that. So here's one out of 4 that are finished, and I'm going to go ahead and put this on a cookie sheet and set it aside until the soup is almost done, and then I'll add them in. Alright, this is my chicken bouillon. I buy it in number 10 cans from rainydayfoods.com. I buy it in a case of 6, and it lasts me about a year. We make everything from scratch, and I have 8 people in the family, all adult size. It's a really nice powder form in here. This is getting down towards the bottom, so it does get hard, and you just scrape it. It's very simple to do, to use. These are kind of pricey, but you're getting a lot all at once. It's much, much cheaper than buying the little, bouillon. What is it, better than bouillon? Yeah, it's a lot cheaper than buying that. And it's shelf stable, so you don't have to worry about it going bad. It's very, very dry. There's no oils in it either, so it's not going to go rancid. So you can go to rainydayfoods.com and you can order beef or chicken. I usually use chicken in almost everything that I cook. It just gives it a really good flavor. I do not use beef bouillon. I actually use an au jus sauce mix that I get from a restaurant supply store in a 5-gallon, no, not 5-gallon, 5-pound container, and that is my beef bouillon, and I'll show you that in just a minute. So this is the au jus mix, and this is what I use when I want a beef flavor. I get it in 5-pound, no, this is actually 6 pounds. I just realized that. And this is about $30 at the restaurant supply store right now. I always keep at least 6 on hand at all times in case they run out. And with the expense of everything now going up and shortages coming, I'm definitely keeping more than 6 on hand. And it's just a dry powder. Again, you don't have to worry about oils going rancid. You don't have to put it in the refrigerator. One of these will last me about probably 6 months with feeding 8 people. So it's much more economical. It's very easy to store. It doesn't go bad. I've never had one go stale, even if it's been on the shelf for a year or 2 and it's been open. So check and see what your restaurant supply store has near you. Even though it's a restaurant supply store, anybody can go in and purchase there. You can buy in bulk. It's much better than going to Costco. You get better prices there, but also you don't have all the eye candy, all the things that tempt you to buy instead of storing up your food. You know, you're buying books, you're buying linen, you're buying all kinds of other things. So the restaurant supply stores are usually a better deal, and there is usually one within an hour of wherever you live, because the restaurants near you have to purchase in bulk from somewhere. So I'm making chicken soup from the 4 chickens that I boiled, deboned, and canned. This is the second time I boiled the chicken bones and skin, so this is the broth that I'm using tonight. And then it's just a really simple, I can spice it up any way I want. Right now I've just got my chicken, onion, celery, carrots, salt, pepper, garlic. This is my chicken bouillon, and I will probably put some red pepper flakes in as well. And the first thing I'm going to do is fry up my meat. I like to fry my meat before I put it into Super Stew because it cooks all the edges of the cut meat, and it shrinks the meat. It creates like a wall around the meat so it doesn't flake apart. It has a better consistency, and the flavor is better because it's slightly caramelized. So that's what I'm going to do first. Alright, so I seem to collect cast iron pots, pans, bread pans, woks, you name it. This one I actually bought from the Goodwill a couple weeks ago. It's very nice and smooth inside, so it has been used quite a bit. It was only $20. It's Lodge brand, so it's a name brand, and it's a good size for my family. I've seasoned it a couple times now, and it's getting much nicer in the bottom. I mean, it's a slick surface, so you could easily fry anything in here, bake or cook pancakes, anything, and it comes off real easily. So for this, I'm going to be using some oil, and I'm going to fry up my chicken, and then I will start compiling my soup. So I have my chicken pieces fried up. I'm going to let it brown for another minute or so, and then I'll put it into my soup. But I like to have that nice caramel color that naturally happens with hot oil and meat. It adds so much flavor, and it adds a really good texture to it too. So another minute or so and into the soup pot. So my soup's all here. I have all the veggies in here and the spices. Just put my meat in so you can see the meat is in there. It's just beautiful. It's my favorite way of cooking stew. You can also brown it if you want to, and you aren't going to put homemade noodles in there. Like I said, when you put in homemade noodles, they have so much flour on the outside that it kind of turns it thick on its own. You don't have to do that with the meat. So the next step is to let this cook until the veggies are soft, and then I'll come back and show you how to add the noodles to it and what to expect with those. So your soup is cooked and it's boiling. And mine is just barely simmering right now. You just start to add in your noodles. And these are almost like little dumplings right now because they were a little bit thicker than expected. So you just drop them in there. And then as they're cooked, they come and float up to the top. So the noodles have cooked and they are all floating on the top now. So I'll go ahead and put this up in a bowl and show you what it looks like. And as you can see, it's thickened. The broth is a little bit thicker. Not quite like stew, but enough to where it's not like water. So that's nice too.